We'll get started. You're all very welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Linda Hickey, and I'm a collector. You might be wondering why it's me and not Gemma Tipton or Aidan Dunn or some well-known art critic interviewing Margaret tonight, and clearly the answer is none of them were available. So, but also, I think the idea from Kevin certainly is that, you know, if we could just get more people across the threshold of the gallery to engage with the art, you know, to talk to artists, you know, about the art in a way that's unfiltered, and that's hopefully what we'll try and do this evening. And the reason it is me is because I'm a big fan of Margaret's work, have been for a long time, and I just think this show is fantastic. So, and it's not the first time, Margaret, that you have used the Greek myths as inspiration for your work. So let's just start there. What is it about these stories that engages you and gives you that kind of creative spark?
Well, so we're going straight in. And actually, my friend Doreen there, we were in college together, and Doreen was pointing out that, I mean, I was using these in college. I was looking at Greek myths when I was little, because I kind of wanted to balance out. When I was very little, I just wanted to know how humans explain the world and living. So I'd go through the mythology of all the different countries and look for comparisons and similarities.
How old were you now when you were doing that?
Tiny. But the thing was, there wasn't a lot to do then, for starters. And we had this like half an encyclopedia and half an index. So you just had to wade through to figure out the stories. And there was a very good Carnegie library. And I just brought home these huge big things and headed up to bed figuring out Norse mythology and Japanese and everything. And because it was terribly restrictive with Western Christian slant, I just preferred the other stuff.
So growing up in the 60s in Ireland.
Yeah, I thought, well, that's far more interesting. The gods get to fail left, right and centre and murder this person. Well, this is way more interesting.
They didn't just fail, they were pretty brutal, weren't they? I mean, eating their own children, turning people into pigs.
I don't think I got those stories then. That might have well, no, I must have. No, yeah. And I remember going down to my mum, and to be fair to her, I just said, Mum, this is completely different to the stuff we're being taught. What, you know, and she would talk with me about that. She'd flesh it out. And then on the way in, I was trying to, because you'd asked me, we were chatting earlier, you'd asked me about this. And so there's that. And also then in college, we had the, how do you say it, the lacoon? Yeah, we had that at the top of the stairs in Kildare Street.
What's that?
It's a massive, it's Hercules, is it? Who's wrestling with all the...
It's Lacoon.
Christine is... We're very lucky Christine is here.
We don't want to go too deep now into the Greek mythology. Just let's keep it...
Anyone that's in NCAD, at the same time that we saw this cast every single day at the top of we did at the top of a magnificent staircase in Kildare Street that the Doyle took back over and moved us out. And then it went to just the concourse in Thomas Street. So he's wrestling with snakes, and it's a really powerful piece. And I remember that just driving in. And then I also went, well, you know, we were still where they taught us pretty classically. We were probably the last year. So we didn't get to a human figure, as far as I remember, till we'd learned tone and shadow. And then we worked on casts. We were sent back to Kildare Street from Thomas Street, and we worked on what I'm drawing here before we were allowed to go on to a figure. So I'd forgotten that, but that does have impact on you, you know. And I love the shades. I love the three-dimensional places to get lost in, and you know, I really love it.
And so when you were in art college and you're looking at all this stuff, and I know it's been such an inspiration for your work, but can I just ask you bluntly, like, why did you think you could bring something new to the review of the Greeks, given that, you know, they feature so much in art and art history?
Oh, so poor old Doreen, and go back to you again, because we were just talking before, and a lot of female artists particularly have done this just recently. So I was already working on these, and I saw that, I think it was Fritz Street had Nancy Spiro, and I love her work, called Goddesses, and then there's goddess exhibitions popping up everywhere. And for me, I was channeling a way to steady myself over the last few years to big myself up. That's why that one over there is called Bigger. to just get through it and come out the other side. The female goddesses it became like a touchstone, something I went to try and, navigate what was happening. And actually this one here, which I'm going to mispronounce, but handily Christine's, Tyche. Thank you.
That's
like
the one,
Psyche, but with a T.
The one with the hat, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, so you're listening to we were inundated, harrowing stuff about the Ukraine, and what can I do? And that day was a particularly difficult day on the news when I was in the studio. So I mean, it was just so sad, the images that were coming through. So I said, well, I made a defender for the city. I knew it wasn't any use to anyone particularly, but it was a response.
Yeah.
To hope that somebody, someone up something that can protect them. And when you see humans behaving like that, that's what I did. That's why I painted that painting.
Okay. And we look at the colour in your work, because you walk in here and it's just a riot of beauty and colour. And if you're to chart your work over time, is that kind of a response to, is it negatively or positively correlated to your mood or what you're reading about or what you're feeling? Because this, you'd say the colours are massively uplifting and really joyful.
That's absolutely conscious. But like, I keep going to people in the audience. I remember Paul McGinley's there and someone asking you, why was the painting in a talk like this? Why was it a circle? The painting was round. It's in Triarch now. Do you remember that? And I think you just said something like, well, I didn't want to do a square. It was just... So my version of that is, I got new paints, I got new paints. I found out about colours I'd never heard of before, which was just a wonderful feeling. And I just went wholly down the route of colour. And the watercolours allow beautiful accidents to happen, where like on the one at the beginning, you'll all have to turn around, I'm really sorry, where you've got it fine, it's all going great, and I just wanted to lash that yellow in. And I went, well, I'm going to do it. And
which one are you talking about now?
The very first one.
The very first
Yeah.
Diana, okay,
And
the profile head. Yeah.
I went, I'm going to give her a big red cheek. I mean, I just wanted to feel like when you're little and you're painting and you're really enjoying it, and I knew it could have ruined it, but it didn't. And then you leave the studio that day feeling great, which you don't always. And so it was a very conscious engagement with joy. And also I suppose it's from being in our houses so much in the lockdowns. I knew I wanted to produce stuff with lots of colour for myself and for anyone else if they want to bring them home with them.
Okay.
And also the framing. So the framing, we've got the bright orange frame there. They were decisions made in lockdown before some of the paintings existed. I guess it is talisman. It's like Buddhists, if you've no hospitals around, you're making things as bright and ornate as you can for that positivity. Yeah.
And then is there a corollary to that too then, your use of black, which I find quite unusual in watercolour, because I think the ones that I'm used to looking at, you don't see a lot of black in them. And the one that Kevin and I bought is that fabulous goddess, the second one in there.
Well, you were saying we might walk around, and all the painters here, like, when you do it and you don't know how you did it, and then you go, oh, I got away with that. So I don't know.
Could you do that again?
No, I hand on heart, I couldn't do that one again.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I used pure black, which you're absolutely right, I very rarely do. But I know if I look up to somebody like Manet or Degas, sometimes they lash it in. Sometimes it's actually a blue, but it looks like a black. Because I did teach colour theory in NCAD for a little bit. Do you remember Theo McNabb? And he'd head off sailing and he'd just go, Margaret, I'm going early. Can you take the 6-week colour theory course with the first years? So, but equally they taught us. They taught us how to make, in a way, the answer to your question is you'd make a black with a blue and a brown and a little white. Sometimes or not, you'd try and make a black that will read as a black.
Fake black. Yeah,
well, it's softer and less harsh, but I think there's proper black on that one, but I'd have to go over it. And that was a battle with the face, and I could have lost, but I think Well, I won.
You won. You clearly won. Yeah. No, it's very rich. You mentioned there Degas and Monet, and I can remember years ago being in your studio, and you had finished. It was one of the paintings from the National Gallery. Your daughter walk in the National Gallery exhibition, and you were very excited because you just finished this one, and you were showing me this tiny corner of the painting, and you said, "Look, there's a bit of Gauguin there," you know. And I always find it fascinating to listen to artists talking about the inspiration that comes from the old masters. And I don't really understand it, but maybe you could just elaborate on what it is you're doing with all of that.
I was painting Therese. Was she in front of? No, she wasn't in front of the Velasquez maid, which, you know, we were talking about that earlier as well. We're so lucky with the paintings in the National Gallery. I mean, they're stunners. And you explained to me earlier why that was.
Yeah, I think it was Sean Rainbird was here at an event a couple of years ago, and he was talking about for, you know, an economy that was as poor as ours was, but that the gallery was very fortunate to have a bequest from, I think it was George Bernard Shaw, and had royalty income coming from his estate. So it was able to buy work that was well above what we should have been buying in Ireland at that time. But I mean, again, I think Margaret and I just kind of got lost in this place today talking about growing up in the 60s in Ireland. I'm reading that Fintan O'Toole book for any of you who haven't read it yet. It's absolutely wonderful. You know, we don't know ourselves, but I'd forgotten how grim it was as well.
It was grim, and I'd go in there when I was little. I was lucky my parents brought me. And that painting, so I'm painting her, but I had got a book on Gauguin in a charity store a few months before. And I was probably heading to this show, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Sometimes you're heading to a show 5 or 10 years before, like I've said that before. And I don't approve of all of what Gauguin was doing, but his
definitely not.
his painting on the skin is extraordinary. And for some reason, I used greens and things that wouldn't have been used in a reduced palette of Velasquez on that one. And it came out like the thing I was aiming at, but I knew I wouldn't get anywhere with that for maybe years. So I was just very happy that it already popped out.
And I guess what I'm curious about, do you know you're doing it when you're doing it? Or is it only afterwards you kind of go?
Not always. Not always. So sometimes I'll wet so these are huge watercolors, basically, which I just fancy doing. And because they're water-based oil, which I switched 2 years ago because the solvents weren't suiting me. And I'd done the small ones, and I just felt, you know, any of us that have had a good few shows here, we know the space, and I kind of imagined, I can see things, you know, ahead, like you kind of start placing the works a little sometimes, because it's a beautiful space that Kevin has. And I thought it'd be great to have 2 big ones there. And I fancied doing massive watercolors, and I didn't know if it would work out or not. So I just watered down these new water-based paints that have a lot of pigment in them that I got, and lashed into it. And the answer is absolutely, when you're approaching something that scale, no, I don't know if it's going to work or not. Not at all. Yeah. So I don't surf, but I kind of imagine that it might be a little bit like that. Like you just get on, I wet the whole thing, get in the I don't know if you could call it the lines, because they very seldom end up as lines. And then I don't always remember so much.
Could we talk then maybe about some of the duplication? Like, are the smaller heads, for example, of Diana, are they studies, if you like, for the bigger piece, or do they...
which one came first?
You have 3 smaller
I just kept wanting to do it again and again because...
Yeah, one there, one down there, one there, and then the bigger one.
I think that came third, that one. That might have come first. I can't remember. And I wanted to do it again, but do more of her. And it's from a photograph of a sculpture, but there's an awful lot of contrast on it. And just because maybe it's got a patina on the photograph, so it's in browns and verdigris, I don't have to paint it that colour. So that makes me very happy. Yeah. Because I go on a bit of an adventure, because I don't know, will the blue work beside the purple, or will it come out mucky, or some? And at certain points it's not going so great. But there's room for liberation and room for happy accidents. And
are you done with that now, would you say? With
the next show
with her?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like a.
Do you get her out of your system? You know.
It's like you need to get out of your system. But your painting that you've bought is because of some archaeological stuff that I've seen lately. Is the darker stuff is where I think the next show will go, and maybe it feels to me more okay to do dark as we're coming out of what's just happened.
Yeah.
And I just went over to the findings of an archaeological dig there just before the show opened, and I've got access to some incredible images of priestesses and really beautiful stuff, and they're all dancing around up there, and they're forming paintings. Great. But they'll be darker, so probably.
And you've always been fascinated painting women. I know it's very popular these days to celebrate the female and the female, but you were doing it long before it was popular, yeah?
Well, if you didn't, there weren't any.
Yeah.
Like that's why the female icons are in like Eileen Gray and Elizabeth Bowen and Countess Markovic. Where were the female painters when I was growing up? Actually, were right in front of me, because we've got the Lavinia Fontana exhibition in the National Gallery, and I was standing in front of that since I was tiny. Yeah. But I didn't always notice the A at the end. Like, I wasn't maybe aware that was a female that had painted that huge painting. And then Germaine Greer wrote The Obstacle Race. And she only meant it, I think, as a taster for people to take off. And then she explored, who I have the, two, Angelica Kaufman and Lebrun, and just tasters and like other art historians now take off and flesh out, because there were women painters, but they got lost in the archives. You had to really rummage around for them, because whoever writes history, the victor and all the rest.
I heard the curator of that show on the radio, and she was saying that Lavinia Fontana, she had written into her marriage contract that she could continue to paint because she was supporting her family at the time. And if it hadn't been there, she probably wouldn't have been able to continue. Like, it was actually written into the contract.
Yeah, and that's a funny way to grow up, to see that those rules, they weren't that much better, certainly when I was in school. And I mean, a lot of that only transpired after I'm trying to remember. Now there's loads of female painters, thank goodness. But you can't see it, you highlight
can't
it yourself.
And all that. We might talk about the portraits, Margaret, because I am the proud owner of two of Margaret's portraits, or we are. One of them is my husband. Which was a 60th birthday present, and the other one is, who's the other one? It's D.H. Lawrence. And it's that ability in watercolour to capture face or an essence of somebody with so few brush strokes, I think, is quite an incredible gift that you have.
Thank you.
But also the way you use colour, like Kevin is sitting in front of me now, and he has a lot of pink in his portrait, which is good. Which is good. But you might just talk about, so the women that you featured here, do you work from photographs of them?
Yeah.
And then, so the fact that you've got maybe, you go back a second time and do something different. So we might look at that as a theme.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I'm painting Countess Markovic, but the strength of her as a character is extraordinary, but I did enjoy the hat. The hat took over in the second one. And I'd never seen her done in pale colours and pretty colours. In fact, it completely changes it.
Yeah.
And if you've mentioned the 60s a few times, like the 60s, even our religion books had lots of kind of psychedelic pictures.
Did they?
Our catechism had Leonard Cohen lyrics, and they'd be teaching us. Simon and Garfunkel.
I think you made that up.
No, I'm telling you. There used to be these really funky catechisms with like grainy pictures, and they had the lyrics.
Leonard Cohen lyrics.
Yeah, they had the lyrics too. We were meant to understand the homeless, like "Bury Me in My Boots" had come out. So there was. This is true. This is true. I swear. It was because it was like after Vatican II, so everything was meant to be right on, and there were folk masses, and it was just more hippie version of Catholicism. I think that's, thank you, Kevin. Kevin remembers.
Really?
Yes,
Do you remember that
it's
too?
true.
Okay.
It's true, yeah.
Sorry, how do we get onto that now? We were on the
Oh,
portrait.
that's, there was a lot of this kind of imagery around, and I had my Beatles album.
All right.
So I thought that looked a little bit psychedelic.
psychedelic, yeah.
It did.
And can you tell us why you chose the other? Are you attracted to the faces, or are you attracted to something more inspirational about the person?
Or both. Yeah, and you want, and I suppose on a facile thing, you want something to paint. You want something to allow that activity to take off. Like you need kind of rocket fuel. I don't always know why one thing works over another, but you need full inspiration, or it just don't get lift off. And that little one there, I'm just noticing it behind you, that came from a little. I wanted to do Aphrodite, but I did a little collage, and just at home, and I think I was on a little holiday or something, and I just was playing with some imagery I had, and I liked the collage, and then I painted that drawing from the collage, and then this painting behind over here. So it's a photograph, but I've manipulated it. Sometimes if I'm kickstarting myself, I'll use a collage as well.
So you make one with paper, or?
Just bits and bobs, and if I like how it lands, it'll lie around the studio for a while, and then maybe I start drawing it, and sometimes they get to a canvas point as well.
And the other women you've chosen, we have, is that Angela Kaufman, is it?
Angelica Kaufman.
Angelica Kaufman. Can you
Because
tell
she
us
was
a bit
in
about
that
her?
book as well years ago. Like I bought that book, it was 1980. I really didn't know there were all those female painters.
Right.
That was just a revelation. And then recently it was showing in a group show that Sinead Maney organised up in, so some of us, a good few of us were showing there in Rathfarnham Castle. And the director took us on a tour. And I didn't realise she'd been there. She painted the Eli family. She was over here.
Oh.
I always just thought this was wonderful.
Right.
You know, that I'm in somewhere that she'd actually been. And
was she what, 18th century Swiss, was she or something? Or?
She's from the 1700s,
Oh,
yeah,
well,
18th, and a protege. Like she was doing portraits at 12, bishops and things, and she made friends with Joshua Reynolds, and he kind of, I guess it's a business as well. Like they were introducing her to commissions, and she came over here. But she's a beautiful little face. And I was just leaving the studio one day, and I went, oh, I'll just paint, a painter. I'll just draw her like a pastel, and it's how it happens. And I just liked leaving the studio and looking back and seeing her looking at me. And then you don't know, sometimes I don't know if it's too pretty, and I put it away. It's a ridiculous thing to be thinking, is it too pretty?
No, it's not. Yeah,
well, but I
kitsch is the enemy, isn't it?
I don't know, because I've done that as well. But there she is, and I do enjoy it. The eyes just turned out. I don't know what happened when I was doing that. It was, I think I got the pastel and rubbed it on with my finger. I don't even know if I was drawing with the pastel. It just worked, and I liked doing the squiggly things. You're just trying to give yourself, if I can free myself up and then someone else is looking at it, it's energy. They're all just they're not just.
Yeah.
They are energy. So whatever I bring to it, and I have to mind that, I might not go into the studio if it's a really crappy day. I don't want to bring that back out again to myself or to anyone else. But sometimes you could wonder, is it a healing thing? Am I making stuff that makes me feel better and maybe makes other people feel better?
Well, I presume in the same way a blue sky lifts all our mood, working with some of these colours must be very
Yeah, they really are.
uplifting.
They do the trick. Yeah.
Can I ask you about the one I really don't understand at all, which is the little teeny weeny sphinx, and what is going on there?
I really like that one. I just wanted to paint a little sphinx.
Okay.
And also, I wanted to do a really kind of a mad sky, and it all came together in the one.
Okay.
And there's only a few strokes to describe her, and I think she's quite mischievous, and she's not as worked up as maybe something else, and I feel she's quite perky. she's like, I was pleased when she arrived on the page, and the fire is just a few strokes, and it gave me enormous pleasure.
Okay.
It mightn't be everyone's thing, but it's like a little stage set.
Yeah.
It's a little place to dwell.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I still don't understand it, but that's fair enough. When do you know when you're finished, Margaret? Either with an individual work or with a show? When Kevin tells you we're on next week, that's when you know you're finished, I suspect.
Like, I didn't necessarily know, well, I knew with these that these were part of this show, but I didn't necessarily know with some of these if this was the show. I began painting them individually, and then it transpired that this was probably a show, and Kevin came out to the studio, and I said, Kevin, is this the show? Or is this the show? And we thought about it, didn't we? And we decided this was the show. And so that's that, but that doesn't happen that way every time. When you're finished, so sometimes on the watercolors, I leave them because the paper is good paper, and the paint may sink in and look different the next day. I may go back to it the next day.
And have you ever gone over the edge? As in, you've started with a
I
lovely
have.
piece of work,
Yeah.
but then you over...
Oh, I'm sure I have.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the next day,
because with
you
watercolor...
might go back in again and go, oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
But the point where it's finished, and everyone can disagree with me, because we've all done something, you know, it pulls away. I don't feel I'm needed anymore.
Yeah.
It has its own thing.
Yeah.
And it's like the end of it's a conversation. It's a natural, sort of silence. That, well, what does everyone else get? Like, is that what, there's loads of painters here. We're really lucky. You know, that's, I think, what happens to me.
Yeah. You know you're done.
I do what Kevin says sometimes, like, well, sleep in it now. Like, if you're making a decision, I might leave it and come back. But or to use that word again, a joyous thing happens where I kind of smile and I go, oh, hello, you're here, like the Sphinx. If they kind of smile back at you a bit, that's a nice feeling. Or they just, they feel they have their own entity.
Yeah, their own energy.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. And the black and white, why did you, was that just a gloomy day or?
No.
No.
It's the sculptural thing.
Okay.
I do like painting from sculptures as well as people. I suppose, so you've asked me a good question because it's harder to answer. There's already a very fine creation there that someone else has made.
Yes.
And I can go in, but I can make her maybe a little bit human, or you know, the sculpture doesn't have pinks or colours, or and I can get a little bit lost, but I'm
you don't want to
enough.
go too far from what it is.
I'm safe enough.
Yeah.
But I suppose the other answer is it allows the paint to do some stuff, which is what I really do want. I want the paint to get an outing.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, do its own thing. So sometimes there'll be drips, and sometimes there'll be it'll go over the edge or whatever. And I'm really interested to see what it does all by itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay. We might throw it open to the floor. Any questions for Margaret?
Do you think, Margaret, your use of colour in these references to antiquity, was it a conscious decision? Were you aware of the fact that originally these things were
highly coloured, exactly. Which is great. And nobody knows what there must be little snippets. You'd know more than I would, but there must be little snippets.
There are. And so
Yeah.
If you start looking at some statues, there are tiny traces of the original colour.
There'd be lapis lazuli, or there would be
all
all sorts of
They
colours.
were very, very gaudy for modern taste.
Which, and you use the word kitsch, which is half the fun, because how wrong can I go? You know, they would have originally, exactly as you say, I do enjoy that. I might be midway through painting one of these classical references and go, sure, look, Do you know? They could have been any colour at the beginning, and that's very good fun. Actually, because then I'm almost like the painter that might have been painting, that would have been given free rein. So I do have those thoughts, you're right. And I find it a little amusing. Yeah. I think you're able to go back thousands of years and be part of something that was occurring then, now. And particularly on that first one, like maybe she was painted like, well, no, some of them also are sculptures from the 1800s of Greek stuff. But yes, you're absolutely right. There is that license. There is that, bit of crack that maybe I'm painting the same color as a Greek person or a Roman person chose to paint. Like, who knows? So it's still very alive for me. Yeah.
Do the male deities interest you at all?
I think going forward, more so, because, like I said, I tend to see a painting and I'm careful not to do that. I've said that before. If I'm driving or something, don't start painting. And, when you see, I've said that before, but there are some sort of like a little mirage.
Wait, stop there now. What are you talking about?
That's how I see them sometimes if I'm lucky. Maybe I've seen an old book or I've seen something in the flesh, because then the other week I was in Italy and I got to see the painting behind Barry there, the original sculpture. But that'll go in and percolate. And if I keep seeing it and I start to colour it.
In your mind?
In my mind.
When you're driving?
Not when I try not to. It will eventually start, if it keeps appearing, I will eventually start to come out. But I don't know when. But there are a few that intrigue you. I mean, someone writing a book or a play or music, it's the same. A little tune goes around in your head. So I think there's some males starting to come out. I don't know why.
And what kind of work are you doing at the moment?
No, because I'm not allowed.
Oh,
I have a commission.
Okay.
And I can, and then some portraits immediately.
Okay.
And then I go on to the others.
Okay.
But there's also there is a follow-on from this occurring.
Will there be? There'll be more?
Yeah. But a different type of goddesses, but still, and other characters coming into it. Yeah, it's like a little puppet show. It's just in my head.
Okay, very good. Any more questions for Margaret?
Margaret, can I ask you about the two vehicles behind you?
Yeah.
You were saying you switched from oils to solvents and you described these as watercolors.
So years ago, I switched because I was going to have children. I was going to try to have children. So, and the solvents were giving me bad headaches, and I was painting with my hands. I think I'd said that before. So, I knew the first week in art college that I was allergic to white spirits because I'd never used so much, and they were getting us to do experimental, and I came out in a rash. So I'm not meant to be using oils really, and there's an awful lot of cadmiums and things. So I switched before Tres was born. So I switched, 20 years ago to water-based oils, to artisan.
I'm wondering, do you find any difference? Because they look like oil paintings still.
So there's new paints, guys. Kennedy's, it's called Universal's paint, or whatever Kennedy's is called now. And I was in ordering a canvas, and they kept saying, "Mark, try these." And I was like, I don't, grand, I've got enough paints, and there's no really, you need to try it. It's a German make, I can't remember the make now. But in the end, when I'd got the canvas all sorted, I said, come on, show them to me. And that blue, I don't have that blue in any other range. So I bought loads, and I'm going back for more. And so that's a great feeling, you know yourself, when you've new paints or new brushes. So it's an oil. I used it, I really, really watered it down, specifically so it's as close, and I made like a little watery container full, so I could splash about like I could with the other small watercolors. But I will be using them as oils as well. It's just that artisan were the only water-based ones I knew that were any good, and these are way better. So that was just nice that they finished their scientific experiments just as I needed them, you know. It's just handy. But yeah, I switched from oil oils a long time ago, and I always say I miss the lead white very badly. I can't. That's the only thing I can't replicate, is that sitting proud of the canvas, and that you can glaze on top. But other than that, I mix extra pigment in if I need to strengthen the water-based ones, and it's just better. You're washing in water, and yeah, yeah. But some people now, there's going to be
Some people get high on the
they
smells, I
love
suspect.
their studio to really smell.
Yeah.
But I can't. I get a migraine for days, so it's no use to me. Yeah, but you know, that's everyone's little nest, isn't it? Yeah. That's how we like it. Yeah.
Good. Any more? Great. Well, look, I know we could carry on all evening, but thank you, Margaret. That was very entertaining, and really enjoyed the chat.